Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing with my students the work that you do, who you are, and whatever guidance, tips, things to stay away from, because I have a couple, but I won't share.
Yeah.
I think this would just be a casual conversation. So I guess just to start off, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. And thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Misha Stone, she, her, and I'm a reader services librarian in Seattle. I know those little things happen to me too. So, yeah, I've been doing this work for 20 plus years. I also teach readers advisory courses in an adjunct capacity for the University of Washington. So, both just a general how to do readers advisory, but also a genre studies class as
Yeah.
well. So I'm always interested in essentially sort of how we talk about librarianship now because it's changed so much as it should,
Mhm.
and readers advisory in particular.
But I don't know if SOIS, I need to double check. I know we have the kind of standard like information needs or literature for young adults and children and
Yeah.
adults, but readers advisory, uh, it's so important for the work that at least I remember in the public library, especially, it was critical.
It is, but it's usually an elective in most
Yes,
programs. Sometimes it's not even taught for adult readers. It's
definitely.
definitely
Yeah.
emphasized in our work with youth, but it's an area of research that doesn't get enough shine. And then yeah, it's something that I think we take for granted that
Mhm.
everyone knows how to do without often sustained sort of commitment and training on the part of both like library schools and library institutions, right? So.
Yes, it was challenging to me as a new librarian to remember. I'm not suggesting books that I want to read or
Yeah.
that I think they should read. Um, I'm trying helping patrons find books that relate to their other interests or something they might find curious. But it took me a minute to separate that.
Yeah, I think that's the misnomer. Like,
Mhm.
reader's advisory is not about what you love. Every once in a while, and it is lovely, you'll get to connect with readers that read similarly to you, or
Every
like,
once in a
you,
while.
you definitely will draw on your own reading, but it is about connecting with that reader, validating what they enjoy, and trying to find the next thing for them. I will say that in trying to move past sort of like a neutrality ethos around reader's advisory and doing more anti-racist reader's advisory, there are some complicating factors. Someone who I have as a guest talk lecturer is Professor E. Lawrence from Rutgers, who does brilliant work on sort of oppressive reading tastes and how to push back also on sort of like neutrality notions around reading and how some of our work really needs to undergird sort of supporting a democratic society. So thinking beyond, the Betty Rosenberg "Never Apologize for Your reading taste." We definitely want to validate readers, and there's some work there to be done in terms of like resetting defaults or biases that show up in people's
Oh,
reading tastes.
oh, that's an excellent
Yeah.
point. That is, I'll investigate that. It would be good for
Yeah.
this course, and also like my public library course or management of library collections. Um,
Yeah.
so what led you to get into librarianship? I also added it, if you did you always want to be a librarian? Because I did not, but a lot of
Yeah.
people do or did.
Yeah, I also stumbled into it. I didn't necessarily think I would pursue this career. I studied literature at Marlborough College, a college of 300 in Vermont, which
Oh, wow.
sadly no longer exists and
Oh,
sort of folded into Emerson in Boston. But that campus sort of folded up during the pandemic. It was very, very painful for alums and students at the time. But yeah, I had to write a thesis and defend it to an outside examiner at the University of Massachusetts. And I remember going to see her after I graduated, thinking, oh, maybe I'll stay out east. I'm from Washington State. Maybe I'll stay out east to get another degree out here. Maybe I'll become an academic. And honestly, I was like, I don't know that I want to be an academic. But she also told me you can pick up a rock and hit an English, major in this city anywhere you walk. And so I
mm,
was like, I had to rethink my strategies, and I was looking into moving back to the Northwest, and saw jobs at Seattle Public Library. and ended up moving out here and getting residency and then going to the University of Washington Library School, Information School, and graduated in 2002 at a time when we had hiring freezes and then furloughs. And so it was hard to get librarian jobs in a city where the program is. I'm sure
Oh,
this is
yeah.
true where you are.
Mhm.
If you want to be a public librarian, they're just, for one, many positions are being converted away from librarian positions. And then we have a lot of folks with MLISs waiting in the wings, doing other work for libraries. So it's a challenge sometimes to get a position that is meaningful to you. I did an internship with Nancy Pearl,
Oh,
and I
wow.
also did a directed field work with the children's group. So I had studied children's librarianship and teen librarianship, but readers advisory was my real love. So um, I had my feet in both worlds, and there are very few library systems again that have dedicated teams or positions around readers advisory. So when a position opened up, I like ran for it, and even though I was part time for a long time, I've stayed. And even though I dabbled in management, I realized I love librarianship too much and I love the variety of what I do. But yeah, I didn't think that this would be my path.
Yeah, it's I'm always it's just fascinating to me how people come into, I mean, I was always a library kid and maybe you were too, and
Yeah.
I worked in the library as a teen and undergrad, but I never thought, I don't know why I didn't, but took a nudge from a mentor, but we all come to it in unique ways.
Yeah.
That's cool that you got to intern with Nancy Pearl.
Yeah. It was, I'm forever her student. And yeah, it definitely set me on fire around readers advisory and sort of the power of that work and how versatile it can be. And how iterative it is. Like you're never done learning. You're never done learning about the world of publishing and genres um, and being in relationship. Like I really love the relational aspects of Readers Advisory. How you're really trying to build. It's not just transactional. It's where you're really trying to in many places or many situations, people share vulnerable things about themselves in
Mhm.
telling you why they want to read what they read, what makes them interested in what they read. And so you're in this conversation and this really vulnerable and beautiful way that you get to learn with them. And you're trying to connect to deeper elements of them to help them find the next thing they might love.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that books and libraries and library workers and librarians can encourage this and build that kind of relationship. I actually do I have Nancy Pearl book list, right? It's
Yeah.
over there on my shelf.
Yeah. I was involved with some of those back in the day.
Really?
So yeah. Yeah.
Man, you're a star. Um, what interests you about LAS? You already talked about this a little bit, and or working in the field, and what are some of your frustrations? I don't like to shy away from the not so pretty parts of.
Oh yeah. No, thank you for that. I think for one, I think what is really wonderful about this work is that it's ever changing. Um, the things that you learn in library school, you have to constantly be in critical conversation with what you learn because you have to keep learning, you have to keep unlearning.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that one of the things I do really love is how it pushes you to learn new things and connect with people you might not connect with in other spheres of life. In many cases, you're, working with the unhoused, working with people in crisis, and then you're working with, readers every day who have questions and interests that will make you have to stop and consult a new resource or
Mhm.
uh, find out who in your teams reads those things. So you're always on your toes in some really, really wonderful ways. The challenges are certainly sort of manifold as well. I think that for one, I just at a higher level, librarians and library workers are sometimes disempowered from having voice in institutions. So it can be hard to be in a program and be told you're going to be the voice of the future. And then to get into institutions where the leadership don't necessarily, sometimes they find your passion inconvenient, you know? So having voice, figuring out how to sort of like be collective and engaged in the directions institutions take is a challenge. I
Mm.
think the other challenge is to some degree the emotional toll of again working with folks in crisis and seeing the ways in which our society has decided it's okay that people are on the streets and not being cared for, and that housing is too expensive. So we take on a lot, and every day are sometimes dealing with, yeah, like really, really tough emotional situations, and seeing people in stress and distress is, it can be hard. So I think finding things outside of work that you enjoy, I think that not building your entire life and identity around your work is really important, because you will burn out.
We are gonna, I make sure if five foundations, we read vocational awe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And basically all my, so if they're my student over a number of classes, you're gonna read that because it's very important.
Yeah.
Especially the emotional labor, compassion fatigue, that idea of librarianship as a calling.
Yeah, I think that we have to be, again, that's another piece that we need to continually be examining and re-examining. And like, so here's a challenge for my system right now.
Oh,
We have a cyber attack. There was ransomware that was launched at my library. And right now we can't do our full jobs. And so there's a lot of conversations about, well, but if you bring in your own device, but also we don't want to like set up expectations that we can do this work when we don't have enough laptops with hotspots to even do some of the work. Like we don't want to overcommit and overpromise when our institution right now is scrambling to get us safe and also doesn't have all the equipment we need to do our job. So like trying not to again get into that vocational awe, but we must, do some of these things. Like we can't provide the same level of service until we're able. And so we have to continually think about the impacts to others if someone, decides to go rogue and I feel like impassioned and I must finish all these things. Well, then that means that everyone else does too. And that's not fair to them when we don't have some of the critical things we need to do our work. If that makes any sense.
it does. It makes perfect sense. Um, I, I just can't. Well, I can believe that a cyber attack would happen or to a library or any place, but I really don't know how long that takes, or maybe you all just still obviously working through it.
We're in week 2, and every day we get new information, and our IT department is working tremendously hard. Our leadership is trying to do everything they can to communicate. It's rough because Toronto, it took 4 months, they said, they had to
Oh,
rebuild their systems, and they had to do manual checkouts, and then they had to a backlog of check-ins. Solano County is going through it right now. Contra Costa in California has already been hit, I think, twice.
geez.
So essentially, unfortunately, there's a GeekWire article about our library right now. We are not alone. It's we're vulnerable in some interesting ways, and I think that this is going to be a larger conversation at the national level about how
Oh
to
yeah.
protect libraries.
Thinking, yeah, I should definitely do a bit more, just because that is an area I'm not familiar with what's going on right
Yeah,
now, but apparently 4 months.
yeah. So
And
I
just
mean,
manual checkouts for like when we were changing over not operating systems, but catalog, like our why is that normal librarian thing? Our check-in and check-out system.
yeah, circulation.
Nice, thank you. Our circulation platform where so it was like a day or two of manual. That's so wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, to some degree, one of the things that the pandemic illuminated is that we are in unprecedented times in a lot of different ways. And it does require more flexibility. And it does require that you continue to interrogate what you thought was good and right in the past. We're continually talking about that in terms of rules of conduct and how bias shows up, and how how do you try to work in a more relational rather than transactional way, and think more about like sharing space rather than controlling space. And all those things again come into play and often are in conflict with the way that some people were taught to do this work
Exactly.
10 and 5 and 15 years ago, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I mean about being in constant conversation.
And this week we were talking about information ethics, and I brought up ALA's code of ethics, but also the idea of neutrality, just just being critical and thinking like it. I mean, once you get onto the job, the stuff you learned in library school, you'll have to unlearn or relearn
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
just make it work in your library system or.
Yeah. And in many cases too, your institutions are not having some of those conversations or
Yeah,
enabling staff to have some of those conversations. So you still will be sometimes in conflict or tension with the policies of your institution. The librarianship and library, wide world stuff has a lot of reckoning to do that. It's slow to do.
I agree. I'm bringing this up with
Yeah.
colleagues or other faculty, and um, it, they did not share. I think you need to see you have to address, you have to show that there is an issue. Doesn't take away from the fact that libraries are wonderful, but they're not perfect.
Yeah.
They're flawed. They're people. Yes, I
Yeah.
very
Well,
much. I've
and
been feeling that a lot recently. I'm like,
yeah, and I think we're just as a society, I mean, Nancy Pearl used to say this in her classes, we're really not good at having civil discourse.
hmm,
So even talking about these things that do bring up a lot, like intellectual freedom and neutrality, bring up a lot of things for people. And I think we can learn a lot by listening to people with whom we disagree. We don't always
exactly.
create those spaces in our staff because we're afraid to have those conversations because they can get heated.
Yeah.
However, these are the things that are central to the profession. So I keep having them. It doesn't mean that it's
Yeah,
like
I keep having them, but I just get some side eye and I'm like,
yeah.
okay,
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because I know I still have friends who are librarians, and I mean, interview librarians and library workers for research. So I know that these things are going
Yeah.
on the ground.
Yeah.
Just when you get to the academic, they forget about that or just refuse to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Um, just going over the questions, like what should we, oh, it seems odd to jump into what was the job search for like for you, but students are always interested in that because and like networking and putting yourself out there. Like I've talked to more students who are interested in either or attending and presenting at conferences and as an MIS student, and which I think is great to at least attend or to get yourself out there and network, which is really hard for me,
Yeah.
a shy or a pretty quiet person, but
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly haven't presented at that many library conferences. Um, I was involved for 2 years, was a co-lead of our LGBTQIA outreach and programming group.
oh
So
wow,
we did things like band, books and drag and nightclubs where we had
that's
like,
awesome.
drag performers performing pieces around the freedom to read. And was involved in a program here with Seattle Art Museum called Legendary Children, which was a cutie BIPOC celebration, looking at ballroom culture and local
Oh,
performers. And yeah, so I've done a lot of interesting things. I've hosted karaoke, bookish karaoke for the library. Like I love like how if you are open to trying things and working with community, you never know what this work will look like. It may look very, very different than what you thought it might. So I presented at PLA in Denver on some of that work at that time. One of my funny stories at that particular moment was also like doing our first band books and drag, in which one of our performers, like we didn't give them guidance. They know what they're doing. And one of them like almost fully disrobed. And I'm standing there next to our city librarian. All this is happening thinking, will I get fired? you know, and luckily, I mean, also this was before there was mobilization against, yeah, these kinds of events. Like we did drag
mhm.
story times. This is 2013, 2014, back before the right had mobilized and was protesting. Um, so all to say, I had presented at a couple conferences. More of the things where I've networked are actually at sort of bookish cons, like locally Geek Girl Con Emerald City Comic Con, where I'm often like on a book talk panel with other librarians in the region. Um, but I think that some of what you know, want to try to do if you're trying to get a job or looking for opportunities, just show up to author events, show up to mixers, ask questions, take internships if you're able. I know that that's not always possible for people financially. But for me, I was really fortunate that I had a foot in the door through internships, directed fieldwork, student work while I was in library school. And working again with Nancy Pearl didn't hurt, but it's hard out there. And I think that just showing up, showing interest, trying new things.
Mhm.
I will say that it's true that public speaking can be terrifying. I do book talking on local TV. I go on the morning show. I have a Seattle Times column right now.
Oh,
I just keep putting myself out there, but I also keep trying to share that work. So I'm really interested in building capacity in other folks. Um, when it comes to sort of like more visible things like TV, sometimes you will get harassment. Sometimes you have your name out there in ways you don't want. So there's a slippery vocational op piece there too. But as far as looking for opportunities and networking, make it natural. Show up in the spaces that you care about. Whether it be mutual aid. I also think that additionally, it's not just conferences that will make you look attractive to an employer. It's doing work in social services. It's doing volunteer work. It's working with the unhoused. It's having familiarity and comfort. There are a lot of people going to this work who are not ready and willing and understanding that you need to be like able to vibe with everybody. Like, I don't know how else to say it, but like you need to know how to work with very, very different people from you and your lived experience, or really tap into lived experience that you have that others don't have, because that informs your work. You do bring yourself and your history and your experiences into the workplace too.
and I think that's part of the issue with LAS schools is that we don't talk a lot about students, or else I met with two administrative librarians at the Milwaukee Public Library here, and they talked about how they have new librarians coming in that they had they just didn't know that they were going to encounter people from just people who are housed, people who need specific types of help or services, particularly after the pandemic when the libraries provided a lot of social services that were lacking or no longer existed. But that it's it, I I do my best in my courses, but to let students know that it's you do need to, I don't know how you can really prepare, but at least know that it's not going to be like this idealistic
Yeah.
idea of librarianship.
Yeah, it's not necessarily what you think. And also, yeah, the reason that it is good to think about things outside of work is that work will tax you at times. Because we are a trusted place for a lot of people, and we have patrons that are regular who come in. I mean, I can't tell you how many times someone has walked up to me, either that I knew and had interacted with or had never interacted with, who said they have suicidal ideation. And then there I am on the desk after just answering a random question or helping someone find a good book, trying to really connect deeply with that person and get them the help that they need. So you never know in a day whether or not, you might be checking to see if someone is OD'd in the bathroom and grabbing your Narcan, or someone has walked up and they are in distress and you are to them a trusted individual and you're doing what you can to learn on the spot how to get them the help they need. This is the challenge and also the honor of the work. But it can be hard on you. But yeah, I really do believe that knowing that not everyone's going to want to do the public service work,
No,
and that's okay. But if you do your best to be good at it, because like when I teach, I tell students to go in and ask for a good book to read wherever they are, because I have students all over. And it's astounding the kind of service they get because people are terrified to do the work. And I'm like, all you got to do is just be curious and interested and make them feel good. Because every day someone walks into a library and gets bad service. So every day I think about the fact that someone may have encountered a colleague sometimes who maybe gave them bad service. How can I turn that around and make them know that they are welcome here. I get people every day who want to disparage the unhoused, and I will not co-sign. And also, someone came in the other day who was like, "Where are your comfy chairs? Is it because you don't want people to hang out all day?" And I'm like, "No, actually, we welcome people to hang out all day. We don't have comfy chairs because they're not easy to clean." Like, I don't know how else to say it, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that yeah, you're going to get to work with, books, materials, and research and stuff like that too. But if you're on a public service desk, your
Mm.
main job is being highly relational. So be ready for that.
Yeah, that's what I took away from doing public service, and it's great to hear talking about taking care of yourself, finding things outside of work. Not it's it's hard not to bring work home with you sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, not just in librarianship, but like nursing and teaching, and because
Yeah. I
so
go to karaoke every week as a restorative space.
that's awesome. Yeah,
That's you find your different copes, and
you
that's
do.
really, a great thing. So
I want to make sure I'm not taking up too much of your time. But yeah, this is a great conversation. So do you have any recommendations, suggestions? You've given a number of tips for these brand new first semester students. Tips either about, since you're also an educator, tips about school, or just tips about anything regarding the career, or just, again, I think the self-care in the non-commercialized sense,
yeah,
a more radical idea of you do have to take care of yourself to help others. But
right. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think looking into trauma informed approaches is
semester.
is important. I think that you'll find that institutions talk about it but don't always practice it internally. So trying to figure out those things for yourself, and learning when you need to walk away or take some time. Yeah, I would say, I mean, mainly I think it's harder to observe some other spheres of this work. Like, I don't know how you find out what it's like to be in a special library, or what it's like to work at a, tech company. But when
Mhm.
it comes to public libraries, you can go in and observe, and find out, would I want to work at this location? Would I want to work for this system? Do your research. Like, are they doing innovative work that you feel um, is aligned with your values? I think that, like, figuring out where you want to work and where you want to spend your time is huge. You don't
Mhm.
always get to choose, and it is tough out there. But the way that an institution feels and how it moves and how the staff sort of work there will matter once you're there. So taking a look at that, even like just I have people walk up and just ask me about what it's like to work there. And so, you might encounter people that you'll be able to, like, just interview, or volunteer at a space to see what it's like. But yeah, I mean, and the beauty of this work is you don't have to stay in one place. Look at what actually is meaningful
Oh,
to you, that really sort of taps into all of your various different interests and talents. Um, and yeah, give yourself grace. It takes time to find the right thing. And you'll figure it out as time goes on.
that is so important and encouraging. Yes, give yourself grace at work, just in
Yeah.
life, um, because we are librarians, and library workers do such important work, uh, particularly public librarians. Just because that's was my area, working with the whole community, working with teens and
Mhm.
different the elderly and all kinds of populations that have different needs, or that maybe you don't quite understand. So you have to do more research and learn more and
Yeah.
learn things. And I like the idea of unlearning, because I remember having to do that when I was at the circulation desk. And I was like, oh, this wasn't, this was different than what I was taught in school, or what maybe like higher up admin, like the policy says.
Yeah.
Um,
And you're going to work with people that embody the work in ways that you're really admire, you're going to admire, and they're going to be people that you're going to learn the ways not to do the things, right, from
Yes.
too. So that's a constant learning and unlearning. You still get to choose what works for you, what doesn't work for you, much in the way that when you're studying, like some articles are going to say things that you agree with and some won't. And you're going to learn from all of those things. Being in constant conversation and constant sort of like interrogatory space about, the work, how we move in the work, how other people embody the work, how you're going to look back and be like, oh, I can't believe I did that, but own it, move on, learn from it. I think that we um, always are in a space of like what we did 5 years ago. We'll be like, oh goodness, and that's good. This is good. This is what we should be like, so.
I thought that relatively recently, just thinking like, 10 years ago, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, even I think about it from a reader's advisory standpoint, like 15 years ago, like the term chick lit was huge. Like we
yeah.
don't call those things that now, but that was a gigantic marketing like
Mhm.
brand and subgenre. And I knew all the writers and I could help people find that stuff. Nothing wrong with that. It's just that like the way that we describe things and even how we sort of like market genres changes over time, and often it just illuminates the biases of the moment in terms of how we see writing and writers and publishing, and audiences.
This is this is related but random. I was just went over at at my local coffee shop, and a literacy organization had they were doing blind date with a book they had, which because I study disability and accessibility,
Yeah,
it's like
an ableist term. Yeah,
it is, yes, but it's so yes, I still see it, especially in young adult sections,
yeah.
and I just it's I don't want to just go up to him like, no.
Yeah, you could do book friending. I mean, the way that we're
There's so
doing
many.
speed friending and things like that. Like, there's other ways to frame it. And even the way that we used to do is in libraries, the banned books displays with like shackles on them and like,
Oh, yeah.
let's not do prison bars anymore. Like, how we even frame things and have framed things in libraries are problematic. And,
Also triggering.
yeah, one of the people that I feel like does a good job of being constantly in conversation around these things is Becky Spratford and Robin Bradford, who do the anti-racist readers advisory trainings online and for novelists. And Becky Spratford is a huge horror fan, but has a blog called RA for All, in which she has conversations about these things and tries to make you reconsider how you do work in libraries, how displays show up, making sure that you are never putting up a display of just white het cis folks, all those things that we have to constantly be intentional about.
Mhm. Yeah, displays is a whole other discussion I've been having with a former student, now friend, who's a young adult librarian here in Wisconsin, and she's um, now teaching staff about creating library displays, but
Mm,
the items that you select are do matter, because I
yeah,
went to my East Side library right down, I was pointing because it's right over there. It's a very nice library, but they had last month they had since May was mental health awareness, which not each I could go on about the awareness part. We're
yeah.
quite here, but they had a book on display that was an author I knew just growing up being very religious, Joyce Meyer, and it was approaching mental health, or the title was like go to God and all your problems will be solved.
Mm,
It was like mildly triggering for me. I was like, but I understand that not everyone has lived in an environment where Joyce Meyer was a huge author for people in the
right,
church.
right. Yeah, we still have a responsibility to choose wisely and think about the messages that we are sending. And certainly what is disempowering to one person could be empowering to another.
Oh,
However, yeah, there's real impacts, and again, responsibility. We have to be mindful, intentional, thoughtful, and again, open to critique. I
yes.
during the pandemic when I was on our book list committee, I started rewriting with my team our our guidelines, and one of them was, if we step wrong, here's the conduit to let us know. We want to know, because also we can't always be on top of some author flies off the handle and says something
Exactly.
random, right? Like, how do you stay on top of that? And some of it is being open to critique and saying, oh yeah, we will consider taking something off a list, or you want to give collective staff and library workers voice in the things
Yeah.
that they aren't always even directly involved with, because they see it, they know it, and sometimes they know better than we do. We can all learn from one another and create an environment in which we are continually in conversation around these things.
Yeah, a big takeaway from yours is conversation, just
Yeah,
even when there's disagreement or and being open to critique, which it takes a little bit of practice to,
it's hard.
yeah, it's very hard.
But
But
here's
it's
the
good.
librarianship. We like, the worst librarians are the ones who think they're right all the time.
I would agree with that.
And I think that getting into a practice of being like, oh, I didn't think about it that way, that's a better way to move.
That
You
is.
may not always agree, but like just being able to maybe stop and think about it will help you be better at your work. Because certainty is, for one, it's not a good information seeking behavior. But in general, it's just people can feel it. Um, so if you are open and continually learning, and if you try to do what you can to extract ego from
And
the work, that will help you and others. Because we're always modeling every day to our patrons and our colleagues, whether we realize it or not.
yeah, that's incredibly true. Just every once in a blue moon, I would have someone, or now just comment that noticed something about me that I had no idea that anybody was paying attention. Just thought I was just existing in my own area, but people are paying attention to the service that you give and um, the interest that you show and what they're excited about, like working with
Mm-hmm.
teens, and they're so passionate about manga. And I'm like, I know manga, but I don't fully understand. But yes, I'm on board. We're gonna.
Right. Or like when I teach Reader's Advisory, so often it has been mainly guided by collections. I
Mm,
don't know manga, I don't know webtoons that well, but someone out there can and should be doing Reader's Advisory around things that are not necessarily in the collection.
of course.
Why not? Somebody could be doing RA for fanfic. Why not? I think that expanding our notion of how we do this work and how people can embody the work is great. It shouldn't just be based on traditional publishing. I don't know, just not trying to hold on to old notions is uh, important. I don't know how to do it, but I want to empower other people to do it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah, zines also came to mind
yeah,
because
yeah, absolutely.
I was
Yeah,
like,
and we have a massive zine library and are really proud of it and are trying to um, create more access for it too.
I'm going out to Seattle in August. So I have been to one of the libraries in Seattle, maybe. I don't know. It was very lovely. But
Uh-huh.
I need to find, because I know there's quite a zine collection, because a
Yeah.
actual zine archivist mentioned that you all, I'm hoping this is correct, you all were endowed, not endowed, well,
Mhm.
endowed, like donated this giant collection. So I'm like, wow, it's just such a unique aspect of zines,
Yeah.
and just all
Yeah, the
as
Zap zine collection is pretty phenomenal. And I have colleagues who,
that's the friend I was,
yeah.
Milo,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, yeah,
fantastic
I would
human being.
say call ahead. Who knows? Like someone just came to visit us from another state doing research and all of our systems are down. I'm like, oh dear. So yeah, hopefully we'll be better by August. So I work at the Central Library, which is sort of the, famous library. And I've been there since it opened and we just celebrated 20 years right before this
Oh,
hack. So amazing.
time just keeps moving. It's kind of wild.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like to share, or any closing thoughts? And also, are you comfortable? May I share? If you're not, let's put your email just in case students have a question or just really curious about readers advisory, because again, I don't think it's covered that as well as it should be in our program.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to be a resource. You can share my Gmail. I'm online with my name backwards. It's Awesome Librarian,
Yeah,
AHSIM,
I
my
remember.
handle. So yeah, you can find me in all those various different ways. I'll also just say one of the ways you were talking about networking, one of the ways that I learned to show up over the years outside of libraries is I'm very involved in the spec fic community. So I'm on the Clarion West Writers Workshop board. It's a writers workshop that has a residential 6-week program we're starting in a couple weeks that has been here in Seattle for 35 years. It was started by Vonda McIntyre, who was in the Clarion workshop with Octavia Butler.
Oh my
Have a
gosh.
scholarship in her honor every year. Anyway, I do a lot of work with speculative fiction, and I was a World Fantasy Award judge in 2022. I just have also really invested in literary communities, sort of like overlapping with but separate from library world stuff, and that's been really helpful to me to not just put all my eggs in one basket. So I know a lot of authors. I work with a lot of authors, both in author programming but just as friends. So getting to know people in the communities in which you want to work, whether it be library world or library adjacent, can really sort of help you again build community and coalitions and collaborative space. So yeah, I do a lot of work with speculative fiction, so science fiction, fantasy, horror communities.
In my 20s, I was a huge fan, and also magical realism, which is not exactly, but still a fan. But I'm glad you brought up not just the focus on conferences, because
Yeah,
I get focused on them because that's what my job is, like, go to
yeah.
conferences. But yeah, there's so many different areas you can get involved in and build a community instead of the corporate sounding word networking. Build a community, meet people.
Yeah, it's taken me many, many years, but like I really, again, showing up is how these things work, and figuring out where you want to show up and creating those spaces will again serve you in and outside of work.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll end recording now.